Well, here we go, boys and girls. After almost 8 months of MLS regular season action, it is now coming all down to this week. It is Decision Day 2018, and I'm pretty sure you know why it's called Decision Day because there's a lot of decisions that still have to be made. And the beauty about this week is that I look at all of the games, and all of them has something to play for each team. Well, at least for one of those teams. So you're not going to have like matchup like last week where it was Colorado versus San Jose and it was a meaningless matchup because both of those teams are out of the playoffs. There's none of those this week. So that's the beauty of this. And also, I'm going to do this decision week preview a little bit differently than I originally thought I was going to do. So originally, I was going to do what I always do with previews and reviews where I draw 12 different boxes, put each game in the boxes, and just preview in those games. But instead, what I decided to do this week, and probably this is the better way to do it, is that I'm going to put the standings for both the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference. And what I'm going to do throughout this video is I'm going to be talking about all those teams that still have something to fight for and talk about the scenarios that they will have. And certainly throughout this video, I'll also talk about in terms of the seeding that each team have coming into this week and whether if they win, they can go up in the seeding, or if they lose, then they could go down in terms of the seeding. And also who still have to fight for that first round bye. And most importantly, you also got the Supporter Shield race, which is just as tight as what the Western Conference is right now. I mean, just 1 point separate Atlanta and the Red Bulls. And I think the other most importantly is that there is still one spot up for grab for each conference in terms of the playoff race. RS7 Galaxy are fighting for that 6th spot, and that's the same thing for Montreal and Columbus fighting for that final spot. But either way, let's actually start with the Western Conference first, because let's be honest, the Western Conference is going to be the most fascinating conference heading into Decision Day. I mean, the East is pretty much set with the fact that Atlanta and the Red Bulls are going to get first round bye for sure, because look at the gap between the Red Bulls and NYCFC. I mean, 15-point gap between both of those teams. And, you know, the only thing I will say that is left to fight for is maybe, you know, Columbus and Montreal fighting for that last spot. And also these 3 teams battling out to see who is going to get home field advantage for their first knockout round. And in many ways, when you look at the Eastern Conference, it's kind of obvious who is going to get into the deeper part of the Eastern Conference. I mean, I think DC United might be one of those contenders of maybe going to the conference final, but let's be honest, we know that at the end of the day, it's probably going to be Atlanta versus the Red Bulls heading into the conference final, and all these other teams are just going to get eliminated eventually by one of these 2 teams. But the Western Conference is a little bit different. There is really just, I don't really think there's a favorite right now of who exactly is going to get to the Western Conference final and who's going to represent the Western Conference in the MLS Cup final, because it is just so tight right now. I mean, 1st through 4 right now is only a 3-point gap between them, and there's still a possibility where the top team, which is Sporting KC right now, could actually finish 4th place by the end of Decision Day. And I know there's going to be a lot of scenarios that they have to do if they're going to drop all the way down to 4th, but can you imagine you coming into the last week and you're sitting at top, and then by the end of the week, if things go completely wrong for you, that you will have to play a first round knockout match against a 5th seeded team? And believe me, Sporting KC do not want to get into the knockout round. That is the last thing that any Sporting KC fan want them to get into the knockout round first in the playoffs, because they've seen what happened to this team for the last couple of years whenever they get into the knockout round. But, you know, you look at LAFC, FC Dallas, and Seattle, all those teams are separated by 1 point, so certainly this 2nd spot and the last spot for the first round bye is still up for grabs. And I think I'll start with talk about Sporting KC and LAFC because both of these teams are facing off each other on decision day. I mean, I'll tell you what, whoever designed this schedule, I know some people kind of moan about the way that the person that designed the schedule pretty much just rigged for some of these good matches. And if you're an RSL fan, and most specifically Corey Bear, who said a couple of weeks ago that he hates the fact that the scheduler are designing the schedule and making them not play on the final week and how it's a big disadvantage. You know, still, I think it kind of creates this kind of good matchup. And I know the scheduler probably didn't predict that Sporting KC and LAFC would be both in the top 2 spot and fighting for the top spot and also for the first round bye. But yeah, it is going to be very interesting. And I really think this is probably the first playoff matchup we're going to have, even though it is still the regular season, because both of these teams have a lot to fight for. And I think whoever lose this match will have very, very serious consequences and maybe even not get the first round bye. Because if you look at Sporting KC case, currently they're at 59 points and they have 17 wins. So far, Seattle and Sporting KC has 17 wins, and LAFC and FC Dallas has 16 wins. And keep in mind, wins is the first tiebreaker. The second tiebreaker is goal differential, which when we talk about supporter shield, that's when that might have a lot to play for, because look at the goal differential between Atlanta and the Red Bulls in terms of that supporter shield. But when you look at this, certainly Sporting KC has the best goal differential, followed by Seattle or not Seattle, but LAFC and Seattle, and FC Dallas has the worst goal differential out of those 4 teams. And, you know, if Sporting KC can beat LAFC, then they pretty much a secure top spot. No matter what LAFC and FC Dallas does in this game, or what Seattle does in this game, they'll settle for that top spot. Now, if they drew against LAFC, that means they will be at 60 points. And if FC Dallas does win against Colorado, which I'm assuming they probably will because they're playing the Rapids, who are really bad. And I can say the same thing about the Sounders too, because they're playing Mike Quake's team, and I know Mike Quake's team are pretty much already looking forward to the offseason rather than playing this game. Then, you know, I think FC Dallas would be at 60 points. They'll tie a top 60 points in terms of that first spot, but Sporting KC will still get that top spot, because I think the goal differential, and also even if FC Dallas win this one, both teams will be at 17, 9, and 8, and that's when you go into goal differential. And like I said, Sporting KC has a better goal differential than FC Dallas has. Now, however, if this game does end in a draw, and now talking about LAFC situation, if this game ends in a draw for LAFC, this is not good for LAFC, because if they get a draw, they'll be at 58, and if FC Dallas does win their game against Colorado, then they will leapfrog them in terms of getting that last spot in the first round bye. And, you know, LAFC, as I mentioned before, I don't think it's the worst case scenario for them to drop down to that 3rd spot and potentially have to play a knockout round, because, you know, they're a first-year expansion team and there's really not any expectation about this team coming into the playoffs. But one thing that I said before, how it might not be good for LAFC to drop down into that 3rd spot or even into that 4th spot, is what if the Galaxy are going to leapfrog RSL on the final day and gets into that 6th spot, and how LAFC have to play the Galaxy in terms of that knockout round, and that there's going to be El Tráfico in the knockout round. I mean, as a neutral, that would be just amazing, but if you're an LAFC fan, that is the last opponent you want to face in terms of the knockout round, because the Galaxy has your number, and the fact that it's El Tráfico and anything can happen. And also, talking about the knockout round in terms of the rivalry that we might have, look at Seattle and Portland. So if Seattle and Portland, as of now, if LAFC drop down to 3rd and the Galaxy gets to 6th spot, then we could potentially have the 2 best derbies in the Western Conference knockout round. And I don't know about you, but as a neutral, that will be a dream scenario. Not only to see El Tráfico, to see who exactly is going to move on into the next round, but you also got the Cascadia Derby between Seattle and Portland. And I'll tell you what, if you think the Cascadia Derby is intense in the regular season, wait till you see what happened in the playoffs. So that would be a dream scenario if that, of course, is happening. I'll kind of hope that that will happen. I mean, in order that to happen, LAFC have to draw against Sporting KC, so that LAFC will drop to third place, and the Galaxy will have to win against Houston. And just talking about the playoff line here between the Galaxy and RSL, obviously RSL is the only team that does not have a game on decision day. So for the Galaxy, all they have to do is win against Houston, and they'll just leapfrog them. Now, if this game does end in a draw, then RSL will go through because RSL has a better win percentage and have more wins than the Galaxy has. So for those people that say that the Galaxy are pretty much unofficially into the playoffs because of the fact that RSL lost last week, and the Galaxy are playing against the Dynamo at home, and we know how the Dynamo are on the road throughout the season, which is not very good. The Galaxy still have to win, okay? They cannot afford to draw this game. If they draw this game, they're out. So it's not like the Galaxy are absolutely guaranteed themselves to leapfrog RSL. And I guess maybe if you're an RSL fan who I can't imagine what you're going through heading into this decision day. I mean, not only you don't have a game, but you don't have any control of this. You just have to pray that Houston will somehow get a draw against the Galaxy, or better yet, get a win against them. I guess maybe the best case scenario is that the Galaxy have to win, and if they don't win, they will, of course, not make the playoffs, and RSL would be going through the playoffs. And yeah, I mean, as I said before, in terms of the rivalry, if the Galaxy does get to that 6th spot and LAFC drop down to that 3rd spot, which means that if FC Dallas does win their game against Colorado, they'll leapfrog LAFC. And I just hope that Seattle does not. I hope Seattle does not actually get a win against the Quakes. And for once, I'm hoping the Quakes can get a win so that it can set up this kind of dream scenario, because if Seattle does win, then they will have 18 wins and LAFC would have 16, and I think that means that Seattle will have one more point than LAFC. So LAFC could drop down to 4th spot, and they play against Portland, which is not a bad team to play, but at times Portland does have numbers over LAFC. I know they drew 0-0 against them at the Bank of California Stadium, and I think they also won 2-1 in the first matchup at Providence Park. So, it's not that is a good matchup for them either, but it's a hell lot better than LAFC versus the Galaxy if you're an LAFC fan. Now, talk about FC Dallas, as I mentioned before, they are actually in a very good scenario of actually getting into the 2nd spot and potentially get into or actually no, they can't get into the 1st spot, because if Sporting KC does win or get a draw over them, FC Dallas will have the same amount of points as Sporting KC at 60, and Sporting KC will get that first tiebreaker because Sporting KC has a better goal differential. Or actually, that's the 2nd tiebreaker, because the first tiebreaker is wins. And, FC Dallas will leapfrog LAFC in terms of that spot. And, I think FC Dallas is still in a very good position because all they have to do is win against Colorado. And I know it's at Colorado, and I know FC Dallas lately has been a little bit shaky, but come on. It's Colorado, okay? Everybody seems to beat Colorado except for maybe Minnesota or some other team that cannot beat the Rapids. I mean, the Rapids are pretty much like the punching bag of MLS so far this season. So I expect FC Dallas to win that one. And if they win that one, I think they actually guarantee themselves in that 2nd spot, because no matter what happened in this match, whether it's a draw or win, one of these teams is going to get overtaken by FC Dallas in that match. And then, of course, for Seattle's case, if they get a win against the Quakes, that means that they could move up to third spot. But if FC Dallas does get a win against Colorado, then that means that Seattle will probably most likely get to they could potentially get to the third spot, because Seattle, of course, has 17 wins, 5 draws, and 11 losses, and they're at plus 14. And let's say if LAFC does win, then LAFC would be at 60, and they will only be at 59. And basically LAFC will be first, FC Dallas would be second because they have a better goal differential, and Seattle will be third, which means that Sporting KC, who dropped down to 4th place. So for Sporting KC, the worst case scenario is that if they lose this game against LAFC, then the worst case scenario for them is that they could drop all the way down to 4th if FC Dallas win and also Seattle win. And that would be a worst case scenario for Sporting KC, but because then they will be playing against Portland. And we know what happened a couple of years ago when Sporting KC played against the Timbers, and how Sporting KC lost that game against the Timbers in the knockout round. So, yeah, it's very interesting. And I'm not quite sure if you have already felt lost. And if you are right now feeling lost or just confused with all this scenario, don't worry, okay? It's going to be very complicated. There's going to be a lot of moving up and down for most of these teams. I mean, that's the beauty of Decision Day, is that you get to see like the table, and I hope MLS will actually have like a live table where they show which team goes up and which team goes down. And I think they'll even show doing the broadcast the broadcast of LAFC and Sporting KC, where there's going to show the table of who's going to be in first and who's going to be in second, and they'll just move up and down, and it will be very interesting to see how that's going to go. So I think that will be a better way to kind of see that rather than just listen to me in terms of explaining the scenario. And if you want me to talk about just a little bit about these games, as I mentioned with FC Dallas and Seattle, both of those teams should be able to win their games. I mean, both of those teams are playing the 2 worst teams in MLS. There is just no way that I think any of those teams can actually drop points or even lose their matchup. And this matchup between Sporting KC and LAFC, as I mentioned, it's going to be kind of like a playoff match. And I think this is kind of good for LAFC, the fact that they are kind of playing this little playoff kind of match in the last day of regular season, because you don't know what's going to happen to LAFC heading into the playoffs. There's just been so many questions about this team. I've been talking about how they've been having problems in the midfield and have problem in the defense, and also have problem of blowing leads late in the game. So, this will be a good chance for Bob Bradley to see how his team do against a very strong opponent, an opponent that could potentially get the top spot and pretty much represent the Western Conference in MLS Cup. And for Sporting KC, I think one thing I am very impressed with Sporting KC lately is not just because they continue to look good even though they don't have a number 9 on this team, and they've been really relying on a lot of their winger and midfielder guys like Shallowy and also Johnny Russell and Felipe Gutierrez as their main goal scorer. But one thing that is impressive about Sporting KC is that they're not having their usual collapse in October and also September, because this is usually the time where Sporting KC started to slump, and when they are in this very bad slump heading into the playoffs, that's why they always get knocked out in the knockout round. So this team certainly is definitely a little bit different than the previous team, because they're still winning games and they're still heading into they're still potentially can get another win over LAFC, and they could be heading into the playoff if they win against LAFC in a very good form and being a very kind of hot team. So Yeah, I think this is a different Sporting KC than what we have seen in the past. And I think maybe another crazy thing I will say is that maybe Sporting KC, if they do get down to that knockout round, maybe it won't be that bad. Consider how much kind of adversity that they have dealt, and something that we have not seen Sporting KC done in the last couple of years. Maybe that might not be the worst thing. Although, to be fair, having just said that, I'm pretty sure if they do get down to the knockout round, those kind of feeling about what happened in the past, because keep in mind, most of the players on this team did play in those knockout round back a couple of years ago, so that could come back into the mind of those players. And if you lose to a playoff team, then that could be just a I guess you could say it's kind of like a psychological kind of feeling where things are just gonna go bad. I mean, but we'll see. We'll see if that will happen for Sporting KC. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the Western Conference in terms of what I have to talk about. I mean, for the only thing left for me to talk about the Western Conference heading into Decision Day is that Portland could potentially move as high as, I believe, they could move as high as third, depending on if they can improve their goal differential, or if FC Dallas does lose to the Rapids, which is highly unlikely. And they, of course, still have a chance to leapfrog Seattle, and maybe if there is going to be this Cascadia Derby matchup, and that Portland wants home field advantage, they better hope that Seattle does lose to the Quakes so that they can jump up into that fourth spot. But other than that, Portland, they really cannot jump up to that second spot, because I believe if LAFC do lose and FC Dallas does lose, and let's say if all three of these teams loses, then Portland goes up to if Portland does beat Vancouver, which that one I don't know if they can beat them, because it's at Vancouver, and knowing the Timbers of what they have been so far this season, where they have not done very well on the road, and if you subtract that 4-1 win against RSL, they have looked very shaky on the road, and Vancouver just drew 2-2 against LAFC in a very good performance. So let's say if Portland does win, the reason why they won't get into that second spot is because they would be, at the very best, if all three of these teams loses, if this is the scenario right now, and that Portland does get that win to get up to 57 points, then Portland will still not overtake LAFC, because Portland does not have the goal differential, unless they score like 10 goals or 11 goals, where they somehow able to leapfrog LAFC in terms of that goal differential, or if LAFC just completely gets destroyed and somehow Portland will put a 6 or 7-0 beatdown over Vancouver and make up this plus 10 goal differential. I mean, that's probably very unlikely to happen, but that is really the only way where Portland can actually get to that second spot and get to that first round spot. And it is still very unlikely, because you also have to leapfrog these two teams that you need to hope that both of those teams also loses, which, again, as I mentioned many times so far in this preview, most likely both of these teams are not going to lose to the two teams that they will face each other in Decision Day, because those two teams are the worst team in the league. But yeah, with that being said, let's actually now move on into the Eastern Conference. And I think I've been spending a lot of time about the Western Conference because it's just that crazy. The Eastern Conference, I don't really need to spend as much time, because really I think the biggest thing that I have to talk about in terms of the Eastern Conference is the Supporter Shield race. Because right now, Atlanta and the Red Bulls, this has been a talk for the last couple of weeks, who exactly is going to win that Supporter Shield. And if you ask me who really wants to win this Supporter Shield and who really wants to win this badly, you got to say it has to be Atlanta that want to win this badly. Because with the news of Tata Martino leaving Atlanta at the end of the season, and the fact that there's still a lot of uncertainty of who exactly are going to be the players that is leaving Atlanta in the off season, you think that this is really just this season. They got to think that this is maybe the last chance for them to maybe win some silverware. And I know it kind of sound crazy to say that, and I'm pretty sure Atlanta fans are probably going to put in the comments below and saying, what are you talking about? This is not, our championship window are not closing. But, you know, this is a really good opportunity to get some silverware for them. And certainly they want to get some silverware for Tata Martino before he leaves. Remember, Tata have not won anything at Atlanta. You know, last season they didn't win the Supporters' Shield. They didn't win the U.S. Open Cup. And they're not going to win the U.S. Open Cup under Tata Martino because they already been eliminated a long time ago. And they haven't won an MLS Cup under him because they got eliminated by Columbus last year. And when you look at this team and throughout this season how they play, you would think that they should be the favorites of winning the MLS Cup. And, you know, heading into this final week, you know, I think you could also say that Atlanta is kind of unfortunate that this year that they had to get into a fight with another team for the Supporters' Shield, because any other year Atlanta would have probably won the Supporters' Shield a couple of weeks ago. I mean, I remember last season Toronto won the Supporters' Shield and they won it with 5 weeks to spare because the closest team that was near them was like 12 points behind them. But unfortunately, since the Red Bulls are also having kind of a historic season, that's why they're kind of fighting for the Supporters' Shield. And, you know, you would think that if Atlanta does not win this, then you could say that maybe this is kind of a choke job for Atlanta, because Atlanta has been in that Supporters' Shield kind of lead for so long now that they could all lose it in the final week of the season. And, you know, when you look at the matchup that both of these teams face, you could say that Atlanta is actually going to be in a tougher spot to potentially get the Supporters' Shield than what the Red Bulls are going to be. Because remember, the Red Bulls, even though they're only 1 point back, they are playing against Orlando City. And I'm pretty sure they're going to try to just show no mercy to Orlando City. I mean, not only I think they're going to win against Orlando City, but they are not going to show any mercy to Orlando City. They're going to try to get a beatdown over Orlando City, trying to get as much goal as possible, maybe get like a 6-0 or 7-0 beatdown over Orlando City, so that they can improve the goal differential. Because even if both of these teams win, Atlanta would still win the Supporters' Shield because of points and also win. Now, if Atlanta does lose this match, then the Red Bulls, if they get a draw or get a win, then the Red Bulls, or actually no, let me take back what I just said. So, if both of these teams get a draw, then I think Atlanta would be, or actually no, if Atlanta lose this game and the Red Bulls does draw this game, then it really kind of depends on goal differential, and the Red Bulls will have to hope that Atlanta might lose more than like 1 or 2 goals. And so far this season, Atlanta hasn't really been blown out this season, so the odds of them getting blown out by TFC is very unlikely. And, you know, TFC, although they have a very good attack, although they have guys like Jabenko and Josie Altidore on that team, they're not going to blow out Atlanta, okay? Atlanta will still have enough firepower on that team, and that's even without Miguel Almiron, that they were able to score some goals to avoid a blown out where it can really take a hit in terms of their goal differential. So I think the Red Bulls, if they win their game, and they will have to hope that Atlanta does lose or draw that game. If Atlanta draw their game and the Red Bulls win their game, then the Red Bulls would win Supporters' Shield, because the Red Bulls will have 1 more point over Atlanta. Atlanta would be sitting at 70, and the Red Bulls would be sitting at 71. And, you know, the other interesting thing I will also say about this is that, you know how TFC a couple of weeks ago, they've been talking about how this is a really important matchup for TFC because they don't want to see Atlanta potentially breaking their all-time points record that they set last season, which was at 69, I believe, or 70. Well, now they might not have to even worry about that, because even if they do not not lose to Atlanta, the Red Bulls could just overtake Atlanta and claim that all-time points record if they can beat Orlando City. Although I think what TFC want, and why I think they really don't want Atlanta to win this game, is that they might have to hand the shield over Atlanta at BMO Field. And I'll tell you what, it is going to be that would be just a nightmare scenario for TFC, and certainly for the fans. It would be just really, really kind of just really bad to see your team have to hand over the supporter shield to another team that you're playing on the final day, and you have to see them do that at your own turf. I mean, that is really, really bad. And I think TFC will really give a fight over Atlanta. And also, when you look at the all-time record between both of these teams, even though there's only been 2 meetings or 3 meetings between these 2 teams, all of them ended in a draw. And all of them ended in a 2-2 draw too, including earlier this season where Atlanta was actually winning the game against TFC, and then they gave up a late goal, and you wonder, will that actually haunt them back coming into this game? Because if they would have won that game, they would have been at 71 points, and they wouldn't have to really worry about the Red Bulls, unless the Red Bulls, of course, win their game, and maybe they'll leapfrog them because of goal differential. Although Atlanta would be at 22 and the Red Bulls would be at 21. So even if the Red Bulls does get that 22 wins, or actually no, it still depends on the goal differential. But still, even if they win that game, they would have been in a much better spot in terms of winning the Supporters Shield. And there's also other games that you can look back at Atlanta's season and some of their losses and draw, and what if they didn't do that. So for Atlanta, it's gonna be tough. They really will have to earn it in terms of getting the Supporters Shield. If they want to get the Supporters Shield, they got to beat TFC for the first time this year. And maybe, I guess you could say that one way can influence them to win the Supporters Shield is that, since Tata Martino is leaving at the end of the year, and I know I said in the previous video of how this would really get a negative impact to Atlanta. Well, on the other hand, it might give them a positive impact too, because, the players want to win something for Tata Martino before he leaves. They want to give him something of all the great work that he has done with this team, and, if they want to do that, then they got to win against TFC so that they can get the Supporters Shield. And, if the Red Bulls does lose out in terms of this Supporters Shield, I'm pretty sure a lot of Red Bulls fans don't even care if they lose out, or really they'll just kind of move on into the playoffs. Because if you ask a Red Bulls fan, I'm pretty sure that they rather want themselves to win MLS Cup than winning a Supporters Shield, since they already won the Supporters Shield a couple of years ago. But now moving away from the Supporters Shield talk and talk about teams that is in 3rd, 4th, and 5th spot. This is really a scenario where who exactly is going to get home field advantage in terms of the knockout round. And as I said last week, I cannot believe DC United not only are in the playoffs, but they could potentially get that 3rd spot and could potentially be playing a home playoff round. Because if they get a win in this game, which they play against Chicago, and I think they would win that one, although DC road record this season hasn't been very good. But if they win that one and they win them pretty good, then they could potentially get as high as 3rd place, depending on the goal differential, because both of these teams will be at 15 points, and NYCFC have to lose against the Union, which is a very high possibility that can happen, because NYCFC has been they pretty much are just heading into this playoff in probably the worst form you could imagine. And the Union, although they haven't been for the NYCFC, although they have been pretty good this season at home, they only lost one game this season at home. They're playing a Union team that certainly wants some revenge after they lost to the other New York team, and they certainly will be coming into that game very angry and want to get all 3 points. And if the Union does get all 3 points in that game, they will also have to hope that DC does not get all 3 points, because again, the Union or actually no, the Union, if they get all 3 points in this game, they would actually leapfrog NYCFC because they have 16 wins and DC would only have 15. So the Union could potentially get to that third spot. So for DC United, they just have to hope that the Union does lose to NYCFC, although at that point DC United will not actually catch up to NYCFC. So actually, you know what? Just ignore what I just said about DC could potentially get to that third spot, because I just realized when I did this kind of scenario, I realized that DC doesn't have a chance. And it's good that I actually do this, because, you know, now I can see which team could potentially be in a spot where they could still get into that spot, depending on what happened with the resort and the teams above them. So yeah, but lastly, I'm going to be talking about the playoffs scenario. And it's hard to believe I'm talking about the playoff scenario in the Eastern Conference, because you would think that Montreal should be eliminated right now. I mean, after they lose, or after they beat TFC, but DC United also won against NYCFC, you would think that that's it. You know, if DC United wins, and that means that Montreal surely has to be eliminated. But unfortunately for Columbus, yeah, I still cannot believe how in the world did they not beat Orlando City in that game. And now they will be playing another bad team. This time it's against Minnesota, and this will be the only interconference matchup on decision day. And you would think that Columbus should win this game against Minnesota. I mean, Columbus are playing at home, which is they're pretty good at home this season, and Minnesota is on the road, and Minnesota has been dreadful on the road. But having said that, we said the same thing last week about Columbus for sure gonna beat Orlando City, and how the odds was clearly in favor of Columbus, and look what happened. They lost to Orlando City. So there could be a possibility that this can happen the second week in a row. And it's not like Columbus are in a very good form, and that last week against Orlando City, it was just one of those games that they just couldn't figure it out. No, they've been in a pretty bad form coming into the playoffs. And you could kind of also argue that, you know, if Columbus does head to the playoffs, and unless they play against NYCFC, they will most likely get knocked out in the knockout round. But still, you know, for Columbus, they have to win this game. And if they don't win this game and they get knocked out to that 7th spot and Montreal leapfrog them, then you could say that is probably one of the biggest choke job and pretty much one of the biggest collapse in MLS history. I still think last year with what happened with Dallas and how they just completely collapsed in the second half of the season is still the biggest choke job, but it's going to be right around the same neighborhood if Columbus does not find a way to get into the playoffs. And if Columbus does not beat Minnesota, then rightfully so, they don't deserve to be in the playoffs. When you do not beat two of the weakest team in the league, then yeah, you don't deserve to go into the playoffs. And for Montreal, you know, they have to win against the Rams, and that is a game that is not fully guaranteed because it is an away game, which could be a little bit tricky. And even though the Rams are eliminated from the playoffs, you don't know if Montreal would just, they would really sense that urgency. Although I think they will sense that urgency that they have to win their match. All they have to do right now is that they just hope that Columbus can somehow drop points against Minnesota. And even if Columbus does not if they lose or draw that game, Columbus will still be in big trouble, because if Montreal does beat New England and both teams tie at 49 points, Montreal will have that tiebreaker because Montreal has more wins than Columbus has so far. But yeah, either way, that is pretty much it in terms of this preview and in terms of talking about the scenarios heading into Decision Day. I know I haven't really mentioned the team that is already eliminated because, you know, they're eliminated. They have nothing to play besides pride and maybe security, job security for next season. But yeah, either way, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button, and yeah, I will see you guys next time.